Alright, so we're going to look at another anti-CV tactics here. We have a which is not known for its AA at all, though it does have a fighter, and Chkalov. The Chkalov has three types of weapons. Has actual dive bombers, which are good against DDs, but pretty weak against battleships and cruisers, because they tend to lose a lot of planes coming in because they have to get very close. They have torpedoes, which drop in a cluster at a long range. So there's a fair amount of arming time to try to generate a juke or something, but it's a cluster, which means you can kind of strike from any angle. It can strike bow on, it can strike from the side, and then skip bombs. People are pretty familiar with skip bombs. One of the things that I want to point out here, because I have watched this replay, is that the Musashi has terrible AA. This is a specifically designed weakness for what the Musashi can do. So unfortunately, I don't have the ability to look at the AA, but understand that it is bad. It is very bad. Because the Musashi is a Tier 9 Yamato. It has the guns of a Yamato that overmatch battleships at Tier 9, while having like a similar health pool as well, similar armor scheme, all that sort of stuff. So this translates out into a few things. One, you really want to play the Musashi like a Yamato. You really do. And two, you really have to be especially aware of CV threats. So if we look at the other ships on the team, we have an Iowa, which has decent AA, an Alabama, which at Tier 8 is going to have a little less, but still probably has more than the Musashi, because the Musashi AA is quite bad. A Riga, which is fine, and an Atago, which is, again, a little less because it's Tier 8, but is respectable. None of these have massive AA that's going to murder face a bunch of skip bombers, for instance, because they're going to drop at long range. But the fact that they have AA that is notable is going to mean something in terms of your positioning. With a Musashi, you would probably want to be central. If you've got some cruisers heading up to the C area, or a cruiser heading to the A area, you would actually want to be between them. And the match that we're going to see is the Musashi is going to be running as an outlier, meaning that the Musashi is going to start to claim a flank alone. And you do not have the AA to be able to do that. That is a specifically designed weakness that the Musashi has, and it doesn't matter if you're against a Chkalov or a Lexington or anything, you will be farmed if you are alone because you just don't have AA. It's almost like if you were in a ship that had a bonus to being set on fire, and you went alone and just got hounded down by HE shells. It's just not going to work. So we're going to open up the match. So we can see that by pulling out here, you are looking to take position, but you're playing into a weakness. You're trying to use the strength, which is the guns, but you're ignoring the weakness, which is the AA. You popped your fighter, which is fine, but because of the way that Russian CV works with the long-range drops, by the way, good job, you used priority sector, drop's gonna come in, and you're already starting to angle. This might, no, all of them hit, it's a triple fire. In response to this, you pop the heal, feeling that, nah, I'll heal it over time, it'll be fine. But one thing that's worth remembering is, you were struck at 1 minute 14 into the match. The distance for the Chkalov to fly from here to there was 1 minute and 15 seconds. So if you used your damage con, you would almost have your damage con up by the time that the CV came back at this distance. And because you're a Musashi, because you're basically a Yamato, you don't necessarily have to get closer because you've got very good long-range guns. In this case, don't just pop the heal, repair it. It's triple fire. Repair it, it's fine. It's unlikely you're going to be set massively on fire by any of the battleships at range. They'll probably throw AP shells, but even if they did throw HE, it's unlikely you would be triple fired. So you can just go ahead and repair this instead of letting it burn. Okay. Now, after being set on fire, repairing it it's repairing it. I mean, fire is completely repairable. But we're continuing to move forward. Atago's backing up because there's triple battleship and he's scared to move forward. But let's look at what the Chkalov is seeing right now. Your friendly CV dropped a fighter in a position that does not help. The Chkalov is going to come in and drop from range, which is not going to give time for the fighter to attach, not going to give time for your fighter to attach, which means it's going to come in, drop, and leave. Ideally, the CV would have been putting a fighter here, would be putting a fighter over B, because the planes would have to fly through the fighter to then take in this attack line. And the fighter would latch and shoot down planes, so obviously they wouldn't do that. The CV is going to want to strike from a broadside position, and if there's a fighter in the middle of the map, they're not going to be able to find that very easily. They might have to peel off and go to a different target, or peel off and fly and take a bow-in shot, which is not so good in terms of skip bombers, or fly all the way down here to drop from the south. And again, it took 1 minute and 15 seconds for that first strike. It's almost been 45 seconds to get from here to here. Now, the further forward we get, the more we're closing the distance, the faster the CV is going to be after us. And I'm going to be honest, it sucks that all of your team is just kind of clumping off in one direction, because that doesn't afford you any cover. What you can do in this instance is, instead of having your bow toward the enemy, you can actually turn bow out. That means that you can start to put yourself in a position where you can kite as needed. You can start to pull away, back off in case you need to heal, in case you need to damage con. There are technically islands you can use as well if you need to break cover. And because you have the massive range of the Musashi, you would be able to do that and be okay. But either way, the CV's fighter was not dropped in the center, which means he's just going to be able to come in. We are flashing a fair amount aside because trying to get the rear gun in, although there's nothing to currently shoot at. So, because there's not really anything to shoot, the guns are loaded and literally nothing's happening, you could already be putting either your bow in or be turning bow out. And before I start the replay again, if we recognize that we don't have allies and staying safe is probably our highest priority because we are isolated, let's say that instead of being in this direction, we've turned out into this direction. The CV has to strike broadside if it wants a good expectation of success. So ideally, these skip bombs will be striking in from like this line, right? Well, if you are pointing out in that way, then the CV is not going to have a direct line that they can hook in. They're going to have a line over there that they're going to try to hook in, and you could simply turn in. You could turn away and drag those planes further and further and further out, trying to find that broadside. You can delay the interaction. The longer you're delaying this, the longer that your other teammates are completely untouched. They will not have even seen the CV because the CV will have been going after you. So that is something that you can do. It's worth baiting fire. If a battleship is shooting at you and you're angled and you're shrugging off the damage, great. They're not shooting at your team. If the CV is shooting you and you're shrugging off the damage, or you're delaying the CV dramatically, great. They're not shooting at your team. These things do add up. In this case, the fires have gone out, and how far has it been until you got hit again? Looks like about a minute. Correct. So it was literally a minute and 3 seconds, I think, since the last time you were struck. So if we look at this damage con, it's about 89 seconds, which means a minute and 29 seconds. So your damage con would still be down by about 15 seconds, but you would have been able to completely repair triple fire. So now that we've taken the second strike, we can look over at the map and see once again, let me get rid of some of the transparency here, that your allies are still off in the distance and you are still isolated. Now, in this case, okay, you're trying to move into a position to get some crossfire because you see the Missouri's moving over. You might be able to get some cross shots onto that. The battleships are sticking together. Cool. Don't be here, bow in to the threat. Just turn out. Turn out and point your bow in this way, or if you want, you can point your bow in this way and try to turn your guns. But most likely, you're going to keep your guns on the relevant side of the ship. So you would turn, which would expose your broadside, but you could pull. You can keep your rudder ready and pull off to the side if you want to bait the CV, or you could literally just turn around, swap the guns to the other side of your ship, which will take about a minute and a half, which will suck. And then you could throw over the shoulder while your guys are kind of getting set up here. And you can use that as a crossfire while keeping yourself bow out and safer from the Chkalov. Also, another thing, the closer you get in the Musashi, the more danger you are in. Because the turret traverse is terrible, and also because this has a fairly exposed citadel, the closer you get, the more likely you will lose out on trades. One of the high points of the Yamato and the Musashi is going to be able to fight from range that's medium to long, and currently you're at about 19, and they're going to continue moving in. So you could really not move further forward at this point, and that would be okay. Especially because you don't have anybody else that is committed yet. You might also look at this as, well, we don't have a DD, somebody's got to go in, but going in isn't going to net you anything here. Going in is just going to get you closer to the enemy, burned down and killed. So the last hit struck you at 1742, so planes are likely inbound. I would save the priority sector and not use it on the fighter. And we can see how terrible the AA is. It's just ticking for 40-something damage. Alright, so priority sector is back up. Cool. You should have used it. You need to use priority sector. It might not actually result in very much, because the upfront instantaneous damage, 3.5% into 6 planes. That's going to end up being about 20% of a plane. So are you actually going to be able to kill 80% of a plane with the Musashi's AA? Probably not. Thankfully, at least the Atago is able to help some, so keeping your broadside having an ally on it does mean that the Chkalov is taking some action, and I think after this he's actually going to come out with torps, because he can strike from the front that way. Cool. So there's a double fire, your heel is already rolling.
The ship is on fire.
In general, there's a rule, which is don't repair a single fire. That's not a real rule in the sense that if nobody else is going to shoot you, just use your repair. There's no reason to burn for free. But if people are going to shoot you, if you're going to take more shells, take more action in a pretty consistent basis, well then it would really suck to repair one fire just to be set on multi-fire. Because then you've just traded away one to get many. In this case, because you're literally on double fire, just repair it. You've already met the many fire condition, and you are close enough that maybe other people are going to take shots at you, but a Brindisi is sap, he's not going to light you on fire. An Edinburgh is AP, he's not going to light you on fire. And battleships tend to throw AP. The Atlantico literally only has AP, but it does have secondaries. The secondaries might light you on fire, but you can control the range you're at. You could just not go closer. You can use the range of the battleship, or the range of the Musashi, to be fighting at range and threatening from the side. Really, at this point, you should just be turning out. You should not be moving forward here. The other problem with moving forward is it's going to bring you closer to the CV. And the CV, recognizing the Atago is there, is going to come in and drop with torps. And in this case, because of the clustering effect of the torps, going bow in is not necessarily going to fix it. And you take almost all the torps on the bow. And now we're in a Musashi, pinched between an Atlantico, a Missouri, and an Edinburgh. You are dead. There is no further movement here. There is only death. Now it sucks that Riga is not really a great frontliner. Alabama would probably be a pretty decent frontliner. Kind of like the Missouri's going in. The Iowa could also go in, but you might have a large health pool and technically more armor than them, but your citadel placement is not very strong. And you are certainly not a fleet of foot. So I recognize somebody's got to go in, but charging in like this is just going to get you dead.
Problem solved, sir.
And very quickly it does.
Ship is on fire.
So in this case, there were 5 fires that could have been removed. Literally just completely removed, and you didn't even have to heal through them. As soon as they happened, you could have just repaired. The second drop did not result in a fire, so that could have been done immediately. You did put out the flood, I guess, with the torpedoes. Taking the advanced position got you eventually murdered by battleship fire, And in general, if you can, the Musashi has a critical weakness. Its AA is not good. So you'd want to be using teammate positioning or trying to stay at least kind of team adjacent because it's just not a strength for her. And ideally her CV would know this. Ideally the other players on your team would know this and try to position around that. Obviously they didn't. And you guys probably lost the match because it didn't look like you guys had a way in or found a way in, and you lost a cruiser and a battleship fairly early. So I would assume that you guys lost the match. But you're not going to win them all. So try to make the best of what you can. Recognize the weaknesses and the victory conditions of a ship. One of the nicest things about the Musashi and the Yamato is you could literally just bow tank it. You could go, and I realize I was saying don't be bow in, but I mean, like, you could have gone with the cluster of battleships that you had, because if the enemy just points their nose at you, your guns overmatch and deal damage to them anyway. Theirs don't do that to you, yours do that to them. You don't have to find the flanks like an Iowa should, because the Iowa has 406s that can't overmatch battleships. It needs to find flanks, and it has a little additional speed to be able to do that. You can just be plopped right in the center of whatever the hell you want to be, just throwing shells down the throats of battleships and getting them dunked. So definitely take advantage of that. Anyway, I hope that was helpful.